Welcome to the Power of One. My name is Melany Nelson, and I am the Executive Director for Northwest Victim Services. This episode of the Power of One will focus on the birth of community-based agencies that offer victim services in Philadelphia for crime victims. And we will also speak with Clergy, who is alarmed by the violence and want to make a difference in the city of brotherly love. Today, my guests are two special Philadelphians, the Reverend Dr. John L. Payne from Ebenezer Baptist Church, who is the pastor at 10th and Dolphin, and First Lady Patricia Payne. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Patricia, we'll begin with you. I know you've been involved with victim services for many years. Tell me how Northwest Victim Services got started and how that agency shaped the other victim services agencies in the city of Philadelphia.
That's very easy. I met Catherine Backrack, who was the Director of Community Services at that time, and it started with her. And then as the program grew, at that time, Mayor Green asked her to expand the program, and it was for community-based victims in Northwest Philadelphia, so that all the victims in that section would be served. So after a while, she broke off from that program and began Northwest Victim Services and started the nonprofit.
Okay.
And as that started, then Mayor Green asked her to expand because Northwest was the first victim services and 6 other community-based victim services was born.
Okay. What year did you start volunteering at Northwest Victim Services?
I started volunteering with Northwest at 1986
Okay.
as a volunteer, going through the training in the summertime. I saw the advertisement in a local newspaper, and I said, oh, I never did anything with criminal justice, so that was my beginning.
Okay. Did you help Catherine shape how victim services came to be today with victims?
No, as a volunteer, like I said, I went through the training and went through becoming the advisory of training volunteers, and from then on became a board member. From then on, I became an interim director, and in 2005, I was named the director after Catherine retired.
Okay. And how long were you the executive director?
I was a director for at least 10 years.
Oh, wow, that's impressive. That's impressive. So, Reverend Payne, you
Yes.
being a reverend and helping your congregational members every day, it must be amazing to be married to someone who understands the journey of helping others. So, with being a pastor, I understand that you started a project because of all of the violence that has been taking place in the city of Philadelphia.
Yes, we started the initiative of bringing the awareness to the community. So what I initiated was banners that I had on there, Stop the Violence, and Blessed be the Peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. So I had about 20 churches that brought into that project, and the banners were displayed throughout the city at different locations and different churches. And at that particular time, I felt as though they had a great impact. Of course, Ebenezer was the first church that we had the banner displayed because we're in an area that experiences a lot of violence and drug activity.
Okay. And so do you see that a lot of your congregational members have been victims of crime?
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt. Not only some of our members, but the people who live in the community. There's been a number of shootings, a number of homicides, a lot of domestic violence. Some of them are members of the church and some of the community, but with our concept at Ebenezer, you don't have to be a member of the church for me to serve you. If you live in the community, I will make myself available to you. So that's our outreach. The church is located at 10th and Dolphin, but we branch out from there and serve as many people as we possibly can in the North Philadelphia area.
Okay, which is, you're in the 22nd Police District.
Yes.
Yes, which is a very high crime area. And you touched on domestic violence. So as you know, domestic violence is a very sensitive subject.
Yes,
And with you
yes.
being a pastor, praying is always good. But when you have some congregational members who come to you and let you know that they've been a victim of domestic violence, again, prayer is good. But I'm a firm believer that you also need resources along with that prayer, because they need safety plans to be able to exit that situation. So how do you handle those situations if someone was to come to you and say they were in a domestic violence relationship?
Well, first of all, there's a lot of misconception as far as women are concerned. Now, domestic violence can affect the male and female.
True.
But mainly it's the females. So a lot of the females that I'm dealing with have been brought up in religious atmosphere or homes, and they think that the male dominant factor gives them the right to abuse them. And I share with them that nobody has the right to abuse you.
Right.
And that you should not be accepting of abuse, because love is not supposed to hurt.
True.
So what we try to do, I try to counsel the female and try to get the male involved also in letting them know, if I can get them in counseling, to give them the biblical concept. But when I can't do that, when the violence is persistent and keeps going on, I try to refer them to an agency.
Good.
To change that mindset that she does not have to accept being in a violent relationship,
Right.
because it would only harm her, the children, and the whole family.
Right. Yeah, and especially when children are involved.
Most
Very
cases,
sensitive.
they do have children, and the abuser holds the children over the head of the female.
Yeah, and sometimes they don't leave because of that. It's a financial situation, and they can't leave.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. A lot of them don't have any place to go,
Yeah.
and they don't have a strong support system. So that precipitates their thinking that perhaps the violence will stop.
Right.
And once you're in a violent relationship, the abuser always says that they're going to stop, but it never stops.
Yeah, yeah. And with you being in victim services years ago, I can imagine that it has changed with like me being in victim services now. Like now we're dealing with the opioid crisis, and agencies can actually get money for that. But I'm sure back in your day when you were doing things for victim services, that wouldn't fall under the category of being victims. So much has changed within the victim services world. And when you were doing it back in the 80s and the 90s, did you see a lot of domestic violence?
We didn't see as much as it is now. And as Pastor Payne says, we could only reach them at a certain point. And after that, then we would have resources, counselors or psychologists, and refer them so that, and then we would have workshops where they could come and have a support group to speak with other females or males, as he stated. But again, we didn't have as much as it is now. Our main crimes were the ones, assault, robbery, you know, those scams, especially for the seniors.
Right.
Because that was my first assignment. When after I did my training, my assignment was to go and pick up a senior to take her to the courtroom, to be an advocate for her, and let her know what was going to happen exactly in that courtroom. So it was a pleasure to be able to advocate for those who, you know, need some assistance in the courtroom.
And she was scammed out of money?
No, she was assaulted. You know, some seniors in the summertime come out and clean their properties, and she was sweeping her property, and this gentleman came over and assaulted her.
That is so tragic, so tragic. So with both of you helping others, have either of you ever been a victim of crime?
Yes, both of us at the same time.
Wow.
We were in a video store getting a video for the weekend, and we would have been gone, but Pastor Payne likes to talk, so while he was talking, the two gentlemen came in, one with a shotgun, and the other was the lookout, and they asked us all to, get down on the floor while they took some of our personal items, and then they went in the back and robbed it. And I was so confident that when it came to the lineup, because I hadn't long been trained, I was so confident that I was going to be able to select the one, but I didn't, but Pastor Payne did. He selected it. But the good thing about that was learning more about the victims, writing an impact statement, so that when the defendant was able to come out, that it's important for victims to, write that impact statement so that they can continue to learn when the defendant is going to be released.
Okay. And that victim impact statement comes at the end. That was
Yes.
at sentencing.
Right.
Reverend, tell me, how was that? I know that experience was horrific for you, but here you are in a video store with your wife, and you're her protector. What went through your mind at that time? Walk me through that whole incident and how you reacted and how you felt it was your duty, because I'm pretty sure you protected your wife.
Yes.
Walk me through that day.
Well, my first instinct was to confront the young man that came in with the shotgun. But there were other people in the store. And the environment in which I grew up in, when you are attacked, the natural instinct is to attack back.
Okay.
But I guess reasoning prevailed, and I said I didn't want anybody else to get hurt in the store. So I said, let them do what they want to do. But when he told us to get down on the ground, I'm still fighting this instinct to not attack this young man. So when we laid down on the ground, my first instinct was to cover my wife's vital parts in case shooting started breaking out.
Wow.
That she would not be mortally wounded.
Right.
So that was my concept, that long as she didn't get hurt, and she was protected. So that was first and foremost important to me. But yes, it was a traumatic event, and I still, after the event was over, I still wanted to take the other course of action.
Right.
Because that was the environment in which I was raised up. You don't let people come in
Right.
and take what they want from you. So,
Right.
but once again, I took the other people's safety at heart that was in the store. I didn't want gunfire to break out. So,
Right.
but I felt as though I did what I needed to do at that particular time.
Right.
And that the individual, as long as they didn't start shooting, let them come in, get what they want, get out of here, and everybody could be safe.
Right.
But after they were sentenced and all, the detective let us know that the shotgun wasn't loaded.
Wow.
But we
So-
didn't know that at that time.
Right, right. When you found that out, that the shotgun was not loaded, did that do something to you? Like, I should have acted on my instinct, or
Oh yeah, that made me even
angrier?
more upset.
Okay.
When I found out that you're coming into the store to rob a store with an unloaded gun, it was the concept was like, okay, how dare you? So once again, these things rage inside of you, but you always have to look out for the safety of others. And in a way, I felt sorry for the young man, because here you are coming into an establishment to rob the place where you can maybe get $100, $200, and that's your mental thinking, that you put your life on the line and other people's lives on the line for $200.
Right.
And that's the maximum that you can get. So that affected me too, the mentality of these people who are perpetrating these crimes, that if something could be done to change their mindset of their actions, that's first and foremost what I do now
Right.
when I visit the schools to tell the children common sense things so they don't make irrational decisions.
Right, and which is important. So here you have somebody who comes into a store with a shotgun. It's not loaded. So as you said, you're going to get $100 or $200. But what if he robbed that store because he didn't eat? What if he robbed that store because he needed to feed his kids? I'm not saying his actions were justified. That's not what I'm saying.
Yes.
But as you said, you felt sorry for him, which is good. To have compassion for someone who actually robbed you. So now we have to look at him to say, what is your situation? And that's good now as a pastor to be able to speak with them. Do you actually go to prisons, or have you gone to prisons to actually speak to the young men?
Well, there's a funny situation. Before I became pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, my former church, they had a prison ministry.
Okay.
And I used to go with the pastor that was head of that ministry.
Okay.
And we would go up to Graterford.
Okay.
And we would talk with the inmates up there. I went up there once, and we had a very good interaction. We had a service, and then I went again. But the funny part about that is I knew too many of the inmates that I had grown up with,
Okay. Okay.
that when I walked into the prison, they were all calling my name.
That must have been real interesting when you were walking with the other pastors, and I'm sure they were looking at you like, okay, John, do you want to share something with us?
The pastors, and we had a couple choir members and a couple of our congregation.
Okay.
And we had a nice service, had a lovely service the first time and the second time. But the warden asked me politely if I would not return
Really?
to do the prison ministry.
Okay, because you knew too many.
Too many of the prisoners that I had grown up with who had got
Wow.
involved in violent activities.
Okay.
I knew them on a personal basis, and when I would walk down the cell block, they would call out my name. I'm not going to tell you what my name was back then.
Okay, Pastor. Okay. Okay. So tell me something. Where did you grow up at?
I grew up in the heart of North Philadelphia, basically around 15th and Montgomery, 15th and Columbia. I met my wife when I was living at 26th and Montgomery.
Okay.
But I graduated from Simon Gratz High School.
Okay.
And we did some things that we shouldn't have done, but
Right.
The Lord was blessing and turned me around. And I guess that's why I have such empathy for people who grow up in a low-income environment, to help them realize that they can change the
Right.
direction of their life.
Right.
When I go into the school, Hartranft Elementary School, which is located at 8th and Cumberland, I work with the 8th grade class.
Okay.
And one of the first things I say to them and have them repeat it over and over and over again is that their location does not determine their destination.
Which is powerful.
And after a couple times, they get it.
Okay.
So I don't have to say it to them. When I walk into the classroom, the 8th grade classroom, which is the graduating class, they say, I know, Reverend Payne, my location does not determine my destination.
Right. Which is excellent. Which
Yes.
is excellent. So your boyfriend back in the day, who's now your reverend, was into some things, which is okay, and so was my husband back in the day. But you know what, Reverend and Patricia, back then you fought,
Yes.
and that's all it was.
Yes.
And if you happen to lose that fight, you would even shake the hands of the person who beat you, but you know you would live to see another day. Today we're living in a time where that's not so.
Right.
The gun violence is just rapid today, and I'm sure that when you were in victim services, there weren't as many homicides as it is now. And again, with you saying that you've done some things back in the day, things are just so different than they were back in the day. So what words of encouragement would you have for some young men? Like you said, there are people who are robbed every day, unfortunately. And in your mind, your first reaction was, do I overpower him with this gun?
Right.
What are your words of encouragement today, because so many people are losing their lives to gun violence, and some of them were probably robbed?
I think what the main impact today is people have a lack of respect. One thing we had, even when we were doing what we shouldn't have been doing, we had respect not only for one another, just like you said, if we had a fight with another individual, when the fight was over, we shook hands and we respected one another. If an adult would come out of their house and tell us to break it up,
You broke it up.
we broke it up automatically. That no longer occurs. People are prisoners in their own homes because of the lack of respect. Because now they don't fight anymore.
Right.
They pull out a gun and start shooting with ill regard for who may be in the line
That's
of
true.
being shot.
That's true.
So we're dealing with, I firmly believe we're dealing with a different mentality, and it's systemic. It just hasn't started now. It's been a process where we've gotten to this stage
Yeah.
where violence is the norm
Right, which is scary.
and not the exception.
Right, right.
And like you said, if not to justify it, but if an individual was maybe participating in a violent act to feed their family, that's one thing.
Right.
But they're not participating in violent acts like that today. They just got this hostility and this anger, where even if you bump into a person, they're just willing to take it on a personal level.
Right.
Of you doing something to them. So psychologically, it's something that not only me as a pastor in a spiritual capacity has to address, but it's something that society
Has to address. That's true. Now, did you deal with a lot of homicides back in the 80s?
Not as much as, like I said, with assaults and the kind of general crimes, but I still take pride in trying to let people know to be proactive when they're out, be aware of your environment, and don't, be alone, especially for females in the evening, but just to be careful.
Right.
And to be safe.
Right, and you said females, and I don't know whether I did ask that question. I'm sorry if I repeated the question about the homicides. But another thing that I've seen and that has become alarming is there's been an increase in female shootings and female homicides. And again, we're going back in the day, how the code of the streets, which you said you were of the streets, which is okay, nothing wrong with that. It was male. Females and children were off limits.
That's right.
You didn't
That's
bother
right.
them at all. But it just seems like there's no code anymore, and there's no regard for human life, which is extremely scary.
Yeah, I think one of the solutions, which I'm involved with the school, I think it has to start with the mindset of changing young people's minds before they get to the point where they're acting irrational. If we start at an early age to let them know that violence is not acceptable for your conflict resolution.
Right, right.
You just don't solve your problems by trying to take another person's life. So if we can get that message across in the elementary school levels, before they get to a high school or dropout stage or whatever, where we can regain this respect for one another again, I think that would have a great impact.
I think so too.
I agree with that. I used to work for the school district as well, in an elementary school and junior high, and it should start there, because some of the, as Pastor said, some of the mentality of the students, you wouldn't believe that at that age, that's what some of the things that you're thinking, or some of the things that they have in their home environment.
So what powerful message would you have for the young people today who are going through traumatic experiences or who have been victims of crime? What powerful message would you have for them to just keep hope alive?
My message to them is to be careful who your friends are. And if you know of something that's happening to you or your friend, speak about it. If not to your parent, to some authority in school or the church.
Okay. Pastor?
I'll bring out one incident when I was volunteering at the school. I would always bring in a positive role model for the kids to talk to. So one afternoon, I brought my wife in, and we were talking with the 8th grade class, and we were joking around. We had have a very good relationship with them. And one of the kids, one of the boys asked me, he raised his hand, and he said, Reverend Payne, he says, have you ever hit your wife? And I said, ask her. Mm-hmm. And her reply to the young man was, no, my husband has never put his hands on me, mm-hmm. which made me realize that there was something going on mm-hmm. in that household. Mm. So I shared with them, I don't have a right to mm-hmm. put my hands on her. Mm-hmm. But it lets us know that these things are going on in these households, and they are experiencing this on a daily basis.
Yes. Well, I want to thank you, too, for being on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
And for those of you who do not know, these two lovely Philadelphians are my parents and whom I am very proud of. Thank you for joining me for this episode of The Power of One. I encourage you to be nice to everyone you encounter. Extend kindness and respect because you never know what someone is going through. Please know you are special, you are unique, and you are important. Your voice matters, and you could be the one to change the world. The power of one starts with you. Thank you for joining us.